Hello and welcome to episode 66 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. It's time once again for our annual Holiday Spooktacular. And this year we're watching one of the most revered horror movies of all time, John Carpenter's Halloween. Once again, we're filling in a blind spot in Ryan's horror film viewing and revisiting a movie I haven't seen in forever. With this horror classic celebrating its 40th anniversary this year and another entry into the Halloween canon coming out this month, we figured this was the year to visit Haddonfield, Illinois.
With Halloween, Carpenter and co-writer Deborah Hill defined the slasher genre and created a new standard for horror movies for years to come. In Michael Myers, a new horror legend was born, and the film spawned a legion of often inferior imitations. The making of Halloween is film legend at this point. Made for only $300,000, it went on to gross almost $50 million and was the highest-grossing independent film for over 20 years. Not to mention it launched Jamie Lee Curtis's movie-making career.
But does Michael Myers still have the power to scare us 40 years later?
Or has the trope of a slowly stalking slasher killer lost its charm? Keep listening.
All right, so there it is. That's the theme. That's really all you need to preview this movie, I think.
Yeah.
That Halloween theme gets you right in there.
It does. It's creepy.
Yeah.
On its own.
Yeah.
Let alone with the movie.
It's one of the first things I learned on piano, I remember.
Really?
Just noodling around, being like, oh, that kind of sounds like, hey.
That's an octave.
It is right off the bat when you pop in that movie, that's the first thing you hear.
A lot of people are writing and talking about this movie, of course, because Halloween's coming up and at the 40th anniversary, it's a big one. So we're falling right in line.
Right.
I mean, we're followers. We've said that from the beginning.
Yeah.
We are not going to lead. We are
else.
not going to break new ground.
No.
We're going to follow the trends.
Right. I'm kind of surprised that we didn't do Halloween as our first Halloween episode, just because it makes sense that we would just be that lazy. Like, what movies are about Halloween? Oh, Halloween.
Right.
But again, I guess it is our Holiday Spooktacular.
Yeah,
we don't call it our
we like
Halloween
to keep
episode.
it secular.
Yeah,
we don't want to go with any sort of specific religion. It's just the Holiday Spooktacular.
Holiday Spooktacular,
Halloween
5th annual.
is one of those holidays. Yeah.
So 40th anniversary movie we're talking about. 5th annual Holiday Spooktacular. I think they're right on par with each other. Yeah. As far as importance
culturally,
goes.
yeah. So I've never seen this movie. Like we talked about in the beginning, and I have a thing with like these iconic horror movies. They really all scared me as a kid. Just
we talked about
this. They existed, yeah. And
fact,
so,
like at the video store, seeing the boxes,
the video store, at the costumes, at the local Five and Dime,
yeah.
Just there's something that taps into like my childhood fears about iconic movie slasher horror villains with masks. So I had a lot of anxiety about watching this movie, even though I've seen some really scary movies and been fine.
When you say scary movies, what's effective to you? I mean, is it the slasher movies, or is it more of like
Texas Chainsaw, I think of the ones we've done is the one that scared me the most.
Yeah, of the ones we've done, I think so.
And I would not, like to the degree that I probably wouldn't watch it again.
Oh, okay.
The Conjuring we've talked about is one.
Right.
The Witch is one.
Yeah. That's kind of the thing about the genre, though, is there's so many different types of horror.
Yeah.
You know, the way that The Witch scared me was very different than the way the Texas Chainsaw Massacre scares you, you know?
I mean, they're hard to even compare.
Yeah, but they get put in the same genre, is what I'm saying, I guess.
Right, yeah. The director of The Witch, he really doesn't like horror movies because he feels like all they're doing is like shining a flashlight on something evil and then running away giggling is kind of the way he talked about other horror movies. And so he wanted a movie that just like sits in a well-lit room with evil.
That's interesting, that you say that, because John Carpenter felt the same way about horror, that he was not really out to make horror movies either.
Well, John Carpenter said that anybody can make a reasonably good horror movie.
Right, yeah.
Because scaring people, he said, is easy. And he never wanted to make horror. He wanted to make Westerns.
Yeah. But on the other hand, Irwin Yablans, I think is how you say his name. He's one of the producers of Halloween. He talked about how, in terms of financially of what makes horror great is the fact that it can be so universal, because basically we all are afraid of the same things. Whereas with comedy and drama, certain types of people like certain types of comedy, and certain types of people like certain types of drama. So it's hard to make a movie that's really universal in those genres. Whereas with horror, you can just make something that really deals deep down with what all of humanity is afraid of. And John Carpenter's talked about, obviously, like, we're all afraid of death.
Yeah.
So that's easy.
It's funny because Carpenter's views are very rooted in observing evil. Like, every human being has like the capability of evil, and the scary thing to him was the humanity of an evil person. The ability of humanity
to do those things. Yeah. Well, okay, so let's back it up. You already said you've never seen this movie.
I did. I went on record.
Premiere viewing for you. I don't have much of a story really, because I think I technically had seen this movie before, but I remembered maybe 2 scenes from it in my mind. I think I watched it when I was in high school, like at a friend's house with it just on the TV while we were doing other things. Probably downloading music from Napster. I actually think we were downloading. Classic. This is like high school, circa 1999.
Yeah,
that's exactly
very specific time period.
Mm-hmm. There were a few CDs that were burnt. Yep, and I think we probably were able to get one album downloaded and burnt onto a CD within the runtime of Halloween.
Wow! So it must have been a little bit later in the 90s.
A little bit, yeah.
This is incriminating, by the way. This podcast is going to be used against you in a court of law.
I think we've reached the statute of limitations on my music piracy at this point.
Yeah, probably.
But in any case, the whole point is I really very little, and I wasn't all that affected by the movie because of my experience. So I was kind of treating this like an initial viewing as well. So anyways, first impressions, star ratings, letterboxd ratings on without going too much into detail.
I mean, very, very favorable.
Okay.
Yeah. I found the movie effective. I mean, I guess initially pre-conversation, I'll say it's a 4.
Okay.
But there could be like 15 minutes of thinking about it that would bump it to 4.5.
Okay.
What about you?
We'll definitely get there. If you were to ask me right as the credits were rolling at the end, I would have put it probably more at like a 3.5. Oh. It's taken some convincing, but I think I've had to kind of situate this into a context. And looking back on it now, I can see it definitely more at like a 4-star, I think.
Okay.
The more I dug into it, the more I thought about it, the more I thought about what it was doing.
Yeah.
And I am looking at it with a whole baggage of a lot of imitators after it, and some of them that have done it very well, and others that have done it terribly, know, and figuring out where this fits in if you're watching it for the first time now and you don't understand kind of how it was breaking ground or where it was coming from and the way that it was made, you can kind of just lump it in with a lot of the other stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's always got to be a place, I think, when you're watching older movies of trying to weigh out your initial reaction with where this movie was coming from at the time.
Right.
And my initial reaction was a little meh, a little 3-star. But the more I thought about it, I think I could watch it even now again and say, wow, this is really actually a pretty great movie.
Yeah, I'd probably like it more the second time. But it's happened so often. You hear about something being the first or the pioneer or this groundbreaking, and you watch it and you're like, oh, well, that's actually, I mean, I can see why it was important, but right now it's not that great of a movie.
Right.
And I think Halloween is still a very good movie in light of its imitators and in light of the fact that everything it does, people have done again, but it's still doing it in a way that holds up. And for me, that's where that like extra bump goes, that give credit to it for still being effective at what it does, even though everybody's done that for the last 40 years now.
I mean, ultimately, it's horror. So you almost have to ask, in addition to, is this a good movie? You have to say, was it effective?
Yeah.
Were you scared at all?
Right.
And I would say, when it's attempting to be scary, it's there probably about like 80% of the time. You know, like it's actually doing that to me as I'm watching it.
Right.
Which is saying something. It's 40 years old.
Right.
You know, that means that there's something going on in the craftsmanship that's able to do something that's timelessly scary. That's to me where the credit is due.
Yeah.
If I start breaking apart, well, how good was it as a movie? Then I start kind of feeling like, well, I don't know if this really worked or this really worked. And we can talk about those things. I'm sure we will. But I also forgot how low budget this movie is.
Yeah.
It really does feel like a movie that was made on a shoestring budget in a lot of ways. Like the sound is kind of off in some places. As good as the storytelling is, the actual dialogue in the movie is very schlocky, kind of pulp type stuff. So I think that the more I can set it in a context that works for me for a low budget movie with these aspirations, what it was doing at the time, super groundbreaking, super pioneering. It's a pretty fantastic film on that level, made by a really gifted up and coming filmmaker at the time.
Right. I guess then let's just talk about what's working in this movie. What does it do that scares you? What is John Carpenter doing right here?
Well, there's a lot. Okay, so what you notice in Halloween is so much of the fear and the suspense is built in the anticipation of what's going to happen. You do get one killing right at the beginning, and it's done in sort of a creative way. You know, it's like a one take kind of thing, and you're sort of from the perspective of Michael Myers as a kid, so it's kind of like putting you in the mind of the killer. That's an interesting thing, but I was kind of like, if this is the whole movie, because that really is not that scary of a scene,
right?
You know, and I'm kind of like, if this is the whole movie, it didn't really set me off on the right foot, I guess, even though I appreciated the scene for what it was. But after that, when you actually get to the parts later, I think what really works is there's so many times where you're just kind of, it's building up to some kind of intense moment, and then there's just nothing there.
Yep.
And it keeps doing that. And it's almost like you can really tell that Carpenter is manipulating you as an audience. Like he's whipping you up into something just to let you down, but then whipping you up again. And so by the time something actually happens, you're kind of at this fevered sort of level. And we should talk a lot about Michael Myers as a villain.
Right.
And what makes him just really creepy, just a really scary thing even. And it's an exercise in minimalism, really. I mean, I think it's the fact that he doesn't do anything and you can project a whole lot onto him.
Well, and in the credits, he's the shape. It is Michael Myers. Like we get that he has that name, but they call him the shape.
I don't know what worked for you. What you would say was effective in this movie.
I actually liked the opening scene, the POV scene, and it's a bit of a microcosm of what I think works well in the movie, is that I like that it just starts you off with, you really don't know what's going on. For some reason, I was struck by the first image of the movie, of the house, but the camera isn't steady. It's a little off kilter, and you're kind of floating, and I thought like, okay, so the house, this house must be important. This must be something about the house. There's a haunted house or something, and then no, okay, it's not necessarily the house. Is it these people? Is it what they're doing as we like move to the window? And then when the arm comes in, I'm like, oh, okay, we're a person. We're not the camera. We're not like, we're somebody. We must be Michael Myers. Like I knew things about the movie enough to know that there was a killer and his name was Michael Myers. And then it wasn't until I saw the hand pick up the mask where I was like, that's a little kid's arm. And then the fact that she like calls him Michael, and it's like, oh, it's a sister. I feel like the movie knows what's happening, what's going on, but you don't. Or Michael Myers or the shape knows what's going on, but you don't throughout the whole movie. And in those instances, you get slowly revealed information. And the more information you get, the stakes are raised or the more scared I get. That's not always the case in horror movies. In a lot of horror movies, it's the lack of knowledge that scares you the most. But for me, with Halloween, the more knowledge they chose to give us and when they chose to give it to us ended up like ratcheting up the tension more and more. And so like slowly figuring out what's happening in that opening scene, to me, I felt like it worked. I mean, it's a little silly. Like the guy, I mean, apparently they had sex, but it was
a minute
like
and a half.
A minute, yeah. But then when he put on the mask and like our view was like so much more obscure, there was something about that.
Well, you have the way that it immediately jumps from that to them going to a psychiatric ward.
Right.
And that's a really creepy scene.
Yeah.
Still not really seeing a whole lot, just a lot of darkness and figures every
just
now
the
and then.
headlights, what the headlights shines on.
And then that Loomis character really is your guide into whatever you're going to learn about Michael Myers is going to come from Donald Pleasance.
But he's in it pretty rarely.
He's not in it a whole lot. And even the stuff he says, it builds the character of Michael Myers, but only in a way that is vague.
The only thing that ever bothers me is their gibberish. When they start raving on and on.
You haven't anything to worry about. He hasn't spoken a word in 15 years.
Are there any special instructions?
Just try to understand what we're dealing with here. Don't underestimate it.
Don't you think we could refer to it as him?
If you say so.
You're right. The more that's unveiled, the scarier it gets.
But the parts that are where you're getting information that's extra terrifying is when we're along for the ride with Michael Myers, with the shape. Like, is it Tommy who gets kind of bullied, and then the shape or whatever like grabs one of the kids and the kid runs away, and then Michael Myers starts stalking Tommy in the car, and we're following Tommy like along the fence, and that's creepy enough that he's just like in this car and Tommy has no idea. And then the car turns a corner and you see that there's like a cage, like a police car, and in that car, and like to me that all of a sudden made that car scary. His potential to like abduct somebody and for them to just have no way out suddenly became real. And then after that turn, we're still shooting a lot through that like police cage. And just that tiny reveal of information, I was like, oh my gosh, I do not want this guy to be near this kid, let alone in a car where that kid couldn't get out if he got him in there. So being along for the ride with Michael Myers, as we're sort of in the back seat of that car, that's just not something that I feel like happens effectively all that often. To be, I mean, you've got that POV shot all the time, but usually not with the payoff that actually works.
Right.
The way, like, to stay in the POV and to keep it being scary through that is a real testament, because a lot of people will give up on the POV at some point and go to another point of view so you can watch the murder happen or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But this movie will like, no, we're just going to stalk for a while.
I think kind of what you're saying overall is that Carpenter has this way of knowing exactly what the audience should know in every single scene.
Right.
Because in those scenes where you're in the viewpoint of Michael Myers, like that's the viewpoint you should be at. He knows exactly when you should know where the killer is and when you don't want to know where the killer is. And then beyond that, he knows that you need to know who's dead and who's not, so that when you are pivoting to where you're along the ride with Laurie, you know stuff that she doesn't.
Right.
And he knows exactly what you should know, so that the stuff that she doesn't know is what scares you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it scares you that she's going into this home where all these people are murdered.
Yeah.
Already. You've already been through that.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, do not do that. You know, and not every director knows exactly what pieces of information to give and what to hold back.
Yeah.
And I think that even matters with the framing of the camera. So the one I'm really thinking of is where they're just walking down the street and you know that he was behind that bush, but he draws that out for so long and so effectively.
Oh, look.
Look where?
Behind the bush.
I don't see anything.
The guy who drove by so fast, that one you yelled at.
Oh, subtle, isn't he? Hey, creep.
It's just a bush. Like, but the camera also knows in the framing where, like, you want the camera to turn. Like, will you please just turn the
You're
freaking
so
camera?
close.
Like,
Because even before they find out he's not there, the camera goes to the other side of the bush.
yes.
But it shows us watching them coming, and you can't see where he would have had to move. Did he just move out of sight?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just playing with angles and with where a bush is and walking by a bush. That's where you can see that, yeah, sure, anybody can make a horror movie, but It takes
not
a
everybody
real
would do that.
expert to say, I'm going to make horror out of this specific situation, and I'm going to ratchet it up to the point where it's really going to be effective, despite never really showing you anything graphic. No killing's going to happen in this scene.
He's just got like that sense for the timing of things. And he doesn't really need jump scares like that.
They're there, though.
No, there are jump scares, but they are effective because he had been holding them off for so long.
Right.
Like, he keeps holding them off where I feel like there would have been a point where it would have been a relief to have a jump scare.
Right.
Because we could have predicted something. But he holds it off beyond that point, at the point where we're completely unsettled by everything. Like, I think of the scene where Annie goes to
the laundry
house.
Oh,
Why do they have a laundry house, by the way? But I guess that's
this exact scene
totally
I was thinking of. There was like 3 or 4 moments where you're like, is something going to happen?
He's going to get her. And it doesn't. And then she ends up leaving without any real problem. But it's not fine.
And you also know he's still there.
We're just prolonging it. Yeah. It's not. That's what I mean. It's not fine. He's still there. And now you've got the girl that she's supposed to be watching there. And you would almost prefer that she had seen him, or like she knew, like there's something. He really kind of messes with what you want to have happen, where you would almost rather he just
kill her already.
Came in the window and killed her. But it's not that simple. And it's way scarier because of that. And I certainly people have done this, and I know I probably talked about how Texas Chainsaw Massacre, no other movie doing broad daylight, blah, blah, blah. But Halloween does broad daylight really well. You know, like the walk home from school, the scene in the bush, and then that unbelievable image of Michael Myers just standing among like the sheets on the clothesline in the wind. It's kind of a beautiful shot. And it does this thing where it's like, you know she saw it, she knows she saw it, but it's also area of the yard that she could easily say like, oh, I just saw what I saw. Like, like allowing the characters to tell themselves plausible lies that we know are lies. And again, like people do that all the time where in movies now, where it's like you look and they're there, and then they look again and they're not. But for some reason, it still works in this movie, at least for me. I don't know. Maybe it's the visual of Michael Myers is just still creepy enough.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe we could talk about that. Like, why do you think the visual of Michael Myers works? I mean, it's emotionless. And the way he moves is intentional, but it's not fast, not quick. I guess I would say, one of our last episodes, past Holiday Spooktaculars, was Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I would say this is a way more effective film than Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, why is that? Freddy Krueger looks scarier. He's a creepier looking villain. What is it about that look of him compared to maybe other, horror villains? It's just a presence.
Maybe that's just all it is that it's just a presence, that he's not a person. He's not a personality. There isn't any motive. There's nothing that he will do. There isn't anything about anything that he's doing that has any sort of sense or purpose.
There's no response. There's no reaction even.
Right.
There might be, but the mask covers it all.
It's not even angry.
Yeah.
It's completely without reason and logic, and that's just terrifying because there's no weakness. There's no thing that you can do to make him not want to kill you. You can't.
There's nothing you did to make him want to kill you.
Right.
Really.
Right.
Although I'm still trying to figure out what it was about Lori, like why he went after. Was it because she just went in his house? Is that what it was?
Up to the door?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it.
Because it does seem like he definitely focused on
Lori.
Yeah. Not solely, obviously, because he killed a lot of other people.
Right.
But he was following them.
Yeah.
And choosing them to follow.
I guess it was because of the house.
And them, I mean Lori and Tommy. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking for motive, it's like...
I don't think there needs to be, but yeah.
But people have talked about it, and I don't think that there's any real merit to it about he killed his sister after she had sex. That there's something about sex that, like, he kills people.
That could be seen in the other killings for sure.
Right. But, I mean, the fact that he still wants to kill Lori, that doesn't hold water.
Right.
I know people have talked about the fact that like Lori's virginity ends up saving her or something, but there's nothing to that. I read John Carpenter just said people would be really, really off guard if they're having sex. That's why they're easy to kill. Like, it's not that it's a moral issue.
No, I wouldn't read too much more into the sex part other than this is a cheap horror movie and let's get some topless women in there.
Yeah.
Like it's that level of,
Yeah.
I don't think it goes much deeper than that.
No, I don't think so either. But yeah, I guess we were talking about why it's effective, why Michael Myers is so effective as a villain, and that's just, you can't dissect anything about him. There's nothing to understand. Loomis as a doctor, he can't even figure it out. He's like, I don't know, this guy's just evil. He's just terrible.
Well, I think it also goes in line with what was happening around the time of this movie with, like, the Son of Sam murders were in 1976. John Wayne Gacy was doing his murders of teenage boys right up until, around this time of sort of the mid-70s or so. So I think there was just sort of within the popular culture this idea of, like, these people who just murder. And there's no real rhyme or reason to the way they choose their victims or what their motives were, or it just seemed to be picked at random.
Yeah. I think also this was almost like the reason they came up with the idea for the movie was the relatability of babysitter and kids. Like, pretty much everybody's had a babysitter or babysat.
Right.
And kind of exposing how vulnerable that is. Like, somebody who's not really at a home they're familiar with and isn't as invested in protecting the children as a parent would be.
Right.
Just realizing how vulnerable everybody is in that situation, that you, like, let a teenage girl have control over your children. That's pretty scary to, like, examine.
Right. That's part of what makes Laurie the hero of the movie, is that what's interesting is she does seem to be the only babysitter that cares.
Yeah.
Tommy, Halloween night, it's when people play tricks on each other. It's all make-believe. I think Richie was just trying to scare you.
I saw the boogeyman. I saw him outside.
There was nobody outside.
There was.
What'd he look like?
The boogeyman.
We're not getting anywhere. All right. The boogeyman can only come out on Halloween night, right?
Right.
Well, I'm here tonight. I'm not about to let anything happen to you.
Promise?
Promise.
She doesn't always make the best decisions. Let's just put that out there,
No.
But you can tell that she does want to protect them first.
Yeah. But honestly, she's never really stupid.
No, not, well, you could definitely see why she would make that decision.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
You're definitely
everything
like, okay,
she's doing
under
she's
that
doing
stress,
for a
what
reason.
else could you do?
You would, like, she has no idea. She had no reason to believe that her friends were dead. She did have reason to believe that something was wrong there. So going over there wasn't stupid, really. As a parent, I would say, like, please don't put my kid to bed and then go someplace else. They set her up as a really smart kid.
Right.
And, like, to the degree that it ostracizes her a little bit. And they don't drop that. Like, she doesn't suddenly become insane. Her final plan of hiding in a closet isn't the best, but even, like, she sets it up so that hopefully he thinks she went out the window, like, she still does things, but her options were so limited. Like, what's she going to do? And then,
what was the most frustrating thing she did, do you think? I mean, because that is kind of a part of the trope where you're like, don't do that, or please don't. That's the dumbest thing you possibly could have done.
Well, I think just running up to the front door of the house and trying to unlock it and, like, fumbling with the keys.
And asking the kid to come down.
Right, yeah.
When a murderer is coming up to the door.
Tommy, it's me! Tommy!
Why that to me was the most endangering
I was
part
like,
for the kid.
oh, you should have just kept running. Like, you should have run into the next house and then circled back around to the back door of the house you were going to go to or something. Like, that was where I was like, no.
The part to me was when she'd already stabbed the guy.
Oh, and
then
she twice leaves him in the room with the knife.
I'm like, I know you're distraught about doing that,
but you also just poked him with a knitting needle.
But like
maybe double
finish
check.
the job. Just finish the job,
Double check on that. Yeah. And here's the thing: I still was with the movie. I wasn't like sitting
I'm
there
with
going,
you too.
like,
I understand.
This is dumb, but I was because the movie's visuals are incredible.
Yeah.
So it's dumb. She pokes him with apparently really gets him with a knitting needle. But she doesn't even look back. Like, she doesn't check on him.
Right.
She's just like, holy cow. She's holding the knife, and then she's like, I don't want to hold this knife, which I totally get. Like, I bet the handle's still warm from his hand, and that would be really unsettling.
Yeah.
But she leaves it in the room with him, and then she goes upstairs. Then she does what she does in the closet, And then she puts the knife by his body again.
I know.
And I was like, hey, I don't know, throw it out the window if you don't want if the handle's still too warm.
I know.
But
I mean, it's like, at that point, it's like this guy seems to not want to die at all. So just finish the job. Like, just stab him
cut
a
his
couple
head
times.
off or something. But so what works about it is...
I think part of it is her performance.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we've talked a lot about Carpenter and his ability to kind of, frame things right and get you in there with it. But when she actually becomes the actual horror victim here and has to play the horror role, which we've seen a million times,
right?
The Scream Queen, whatever you want to call it.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, she is the Scream Queen.
Yeah.
Every performance has been a facsimile of her performance.
Well, I mean, but you had like her mother, Psycho, before that. And I mean, you had, I don't remember her name, but the woman in Texas Chainsaw Massacre was, hysterical. And that was before this movie. And you've had the woman in King Kong. It's a thing. But even before this, but what I like about her performance is I think she does a good job of showing that she is truly affected. And part of this is just fight or flight.
Yeah.
I think she shows that very well, that it's someone who's very smart in a fight or flight situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes they make kind of dumb decisions, but sometimes she's kind of smart. So weigh it out and you're like, I think she's actually a very believable character in this situation.
Yeah.
I can't say I'd be any smarter in this situation, because I also think she really conveys what it means to kill someone when you're not someone who would ever do that.
But also what works about like the fact that she left the knife in the room the second time is the way it's shot with her catching her breath and like trying to calm down against the door frame before she goes in to talk to the kids. Like that is why she's doing that. It's not one of those things. It's like, get out of there now. Like, what are you doing? Like clearly she does not want to go into the kids freaked out that much. So she's trying to calm down. And then in the background, out of focus, you see Michael laying down and then you just see him sit up. Now that was probably the second scariest moment for me. The first scariest is one of like the most brilliant shots in the movie where she's found the dead bodies and she backs up next to a dark closet. And then all of a sudden you just see Michael Myers' face fade in from the blackness. That's just, I mean, unparalleled. I don't know if you could do a moment like that in this type of movie ever again that's going to be that effective. I mean, knowing how to take simple elements and put them together, just a little bit of light where there was darkness and a single piano note played the right way.
Yeah.
And it's for me the scariest moment in the movie. And the fact that he doesn't jump out is even scarier because the scariest thing about him is his stalking.
Well, I think going along with the stalking being kind of one of the scariest things about Michael Myers is in this movie, the horror is coming to you, I guess. Like, I would say to me, what would be like the scariest movie before this would be Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But those are kids who were really somewhere they shouldn't have been. Yeah. I mean, that's a real point the movie's trying to make is that this is small town America. This is your life. And that scariness of thinking that like, even like as we're recording right now, we're like in the burbs right now.
Right.
And do we want to look out that window? Because Michael Myers could be there. That's part of the stalking aspect of it. It's actually seeking you out.
Right. Anything that's like a cult or,
usually with the occult stuff, it's like you were messing with something you shouldn't have been messing with.
Right. But yeah, this is just evil coming into your neighborhood, coming into your home.
Yeah.
Where you have every right to be.
Right.
Maybe even doing things right.
I mean, even in something like The Conjuring, which creeped both of us out, that's still like, well, you went in that house, that was a house you shouldn't have been in or something like that.
Yeah.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff. You can either ignore it or you can help me to stop it.
More fancy talk. Doctor, do you know what Haddonfield is? Families, children, all lined up in rows up and down these streets. You're telling me they're lined up for a slaughterhouse?
They could be.
All right.
I also wanted to say Jamie Lee Curtis, her like final crying scene. It's just so emotional and so raw. Like she's just amazing. She's doing more with that character beyond the script that it's deeper than just like the scream, and it's deeper than just like the way that she looks scared.
I kept getting the feeling as I was watching that where I was just like, how scarred is she going to be from this for the rest of her life?
Yeah.
You know?
Apparently not that scarred. She reprised the role several times.
Sure. No, I mean the character.
Oh, the character. Okay,
Like,
I thought you were talking about Jamie
No.
Lee Curtis.
Like, I mean, obviously, yeah. I think she's just doing a great acting job. But I mean, like, the character is. I don't know that I always feel that way when I'm where I'm kind of like. Not only am I scared for you in that moment, I'm like, what is this doing to you?
As long as they live, they're fine. But yeah, with her, it's like
she will be forever changed.
She's not going to babysit again.
Did you listen at all to the podcast Halloween Unmasked?
Yeah.
Which I recommend to our listeners if they're curious.
From The Ringer.
From The Ringer. Amy Nicholson is one of the film critics for The Ringer, and it's her hosting and going really in depth. I got to be honest, a lot of what I'm bringing up to this episode is coming from that podcast, but they actually interview Jamie Lee Curtis, and she even connects her reprisal in this movie as being somewhat of a Me Too character. Even viewing this movie now, I mean, it was certainly on my mind watching it.
Who knows if this was the mind of Carpenter and Hill when they wrote this, but I couldn't help but see a man stalking 3 girls and the 3 girls talking about dating and like who wants to have sex with them and who like whatever, and not seeing some sort of parallel between just like the general predatory nature of male sexuality. Where it sort of falls apart is these girls do not seem like they don't own their sexuality. Annie and Linda are very active participants in their sex lives, it seems like.
It's extremely consensual. And, I mean, it should be mentioned that this movie is co-written.
Yes.
So it's John Carpenter writing, and then it's also his girlfriend at the time, Deborah Hill, who also is a producer of the movie. And my understanding is that she wrote a lot of the like dialogue, especially all the dialogue of like the girls talking to each other, and also like a lot of what Tommy says and stuff like that.
So if there's a feminist or
if there just seems
dealing like a specifically female perspective in those scenes, it is.
Yeah, if this movie seems a little bit more in tune with the female perspective, I think that's probably accurate because there was an actual female writing this movie. So I don't want to detract from what is really great about this movie.
Yep.
Some of that dialogue I just thought was like low budget horror movie kind of dialogue. I don't know.
Like what specifically? I would actually say Loomis more than the girls, but you seem to think the girls more than Loomis.
I actually think more than that, a lot of the stuff that Tommy, like the boogeyman stuff.
Oh. Leave me alone. He's gonna get you. 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 The boogeyman is coming. Leave me alone. He doesn't believe us. Don't you know what happens on Halloween? Yeah, we get candy. Boogeyman, ooh, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman.
And also just the whole Halloween idea, like the holiday Halloween, feels so shoved in there to me. Like, I guess this is supposed to be Halloween, but I didn't see. There's like no trick or treaters out. There's all you hear is like the cop
Michael
talking
Myers
about.
Is wearing a. Oh, you mean the actual like the night of the thing?
It's supposed to be
there
Halloween.
There are trick or
night.
treaters. Yeah,
maybe in like the opening scene, but it just doesn't feel like there's a lot going on.
Now, I know we joked about this last time, but maybe people didn't widely trick or treat. Like
maybe I thought they did. I don't know.
All right, so you just feel like there were that.
It's a combination of like it didn't really seem like it needed to be Halloween. Halloween didn't factor very much into it at all.
Except for people were potentially less on their guard because they were like, well, Halloween's the night people try to trick people, so
could be.
So they were much more prone to be like, ha ha, very funny, rather than like, that's not supposed to be happening.
But they never played that up too much, except for the really sad scene where she's like saying, help me, and the neighbor just does not answer the door. Yeah. But I don't think that's because she thought it was like a...
I think that the neighbor was like, ugh, Halloween, teenager.
You think so? I don't know. It could be that, or it could just be that the neighbor was like, I don't want any part in whatever's going on out there.
They do... I mean, that reading is very sad, yeah. That if it's like... we'll all turn our backs on each other when we really need it. But I think because there were a few times early on in the movie where they talk about
the kids going out pranking and getting high, and the officer talks about that with Loomis.
Right. Yeah. So I think in that regard, it actually, it does make sense. But otherwise, it might just be might have been restraints of the budget that they didn't have enough extras to be trick-or-treaters.
That's what I mean is, I think that's where when I put it in context of like, this is a super low budget movie. So there's that, and then there's just the stuff about the boogeyman in general. And they bring it up a couple times, like, there's the kids picking on Tommy, the boogeyman's going to get you or whatever. Is that how kids bullied back then?
I don't know.
It just seemed kind of weird to me. And then he thinks that Michael Myers is the boogeyman. I don't know. I don't know what that's about.
Again, it's that sort of thing where somebody is going to actively try to not believe what's actually happening. Laurie, as Tommy's babysitter, is going to say there isn't the boogeyman. That's not the boogeyman. You aren't seeing the boogeyman. And then she's just continuing that sort of like putting those barriers between her and actual being on guard, being aware. To me, it makes the amount of time it takes Laurie to act more plausible. But it is just sort of a silly sort of thing. I never understood the boogeyman to be a real threat in my life.
No, I never thought much of the boogeyman. Or what. I was kind of like, actually, when I heard it in Halloween, I was like, I haven't heard of the boogeyman in like forever. What was that supposed to be?
Yeah.
Kind of like the Babadook now?
Maybe. Yeah, I'm afraid of the Babadook. Definitely.
And then there's the Linda scene, which I think is the closest it gets to kind of campiness with, she's like, go get me a beer,
Yeah.
And then Michael Myers comes up in the ghost sheet with the glasses.
Yeah. I mean, it's silly, but it's also
it did work.
Scary.
It worked. But you got to admit, that was kind of the closest it got to kind of schlocky horror movie.
And I think both Linda and Annie go cross-eyed as they're getting killed, or even as they're when they're dead.
And then you had Bob. Okay. So he is somehow impaled into the wall.
Yeah.
The knife going in and actually being
Deep
able to hold him up. And like, have you ever stabbed a wall that hard?
But then again,
he must be going into a stud, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I think he actually stabbed him into a cabinet, which is even less plausible. But you take those elements, and what happens after that? Nobody really remembers that he impaled him on the knife and is suspended on the wall. What they remember is the time he takes to watch Michael Myers inspect his handiwork. And that is scary. It's unsettling.
I think understanding that this was a movie that was just kind of made, it wasn't made to be this groundbreaking horror movie. It was made to be sort of like an effective horror movie that scared people. And I always have to remember when I watch these movies that came out in the 70s or whatever, no one thought these were ever going to be on like VHS or DVD or anything or be rewatched over and over again. This was a movie that was made for a theater experience, and on that level, it works incredibly well. And I can kind of overlook some of the cheesiness of it. But if you're going to rewatch it and really dissect it, I think there is a B movie cheesiness to it that is kind of unavoidable, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe I was just feeling the need to overlook it more, because even within that, there were times where I was like, I can tell they're doing this in one take because they had to get the shot done that day.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, but they're doing it fine. Like the way that they do their walk home from school, and mainly one tracking shot for a time before they see him behind the bush. I was like, this is still a really well done Steadicam shot. They understood their limitations and they worked within them. And there's real characters there. They have personalities and motivations that make a ton of sense. Now so there are things that are either plot holes or are things that I feel like just don't quite make sense with the rest of the movie. One is, and this undermines the idea of the lack of motivation in the Shape or Michael Myers, that there's this fear there that is increased because there's no logic to it. And the fact that he steals the gravestone and then sets up the tableau of Annie with the gravestone. Sure, like horror movie visual, fine. It tells Laurie nothing to see the gravestone of Judith Myers.
Right.
And it does imply that there's some sort of like psychological working out that Michael Myers is trying to do. Like he's like, I just need to sort some stuff out. Like
I didn't get that whole gravestone bit at all, other than that telling Loomis that that's where he was.
He was on the right track.
That's it. I was kind of this. I'm with you.
And
I was like, what is?
like,
why would he steal
back.
that? Like, you know,
and clean it up so nicely.
Rent a pressure washer at some point.
Sure, he did.
He's a real handyman, you know, stabbing into
Sam Loomis goes to like the rental area of a hardware shop, and they're like, "Has anybody come in here and rented anything without talking?" This one guy.
He did go to a hardware store, and he said he got rope and
Halloween mask.
Yeah.
So that whole thing again, good image, whatever, lasting image. Probably in the 70s, that would have been the go-to. Now I feel like it's actually one of the more cliched, hackneyed parts of it, that she's kind of in a crucifix form, the way she's laying there. There's the tombstone. And to me, it undermines a lot about what works about Michael Myers as a concept. And it just doesn't really make sense. Where did he have that, by the way?
The whole time.
It must have been in the car, I guess. But another sort of plot holy thing, why weren't they just looking for that car? Because that car was all over town. It's not like he ditched it. That was how he stalked.
Well, Loomis kind of tells the police not to do anything.
Just because he doesn't trust police work.
I guess.
So maybe that's what it is. He didn't tell him. Also, Loomis just has dumb plans. I'll hang out by the house. And then I'll start walking.
Yeah.
I'll just walk. And Michael Myers has really bad knife aim. At least when Laurie is concerned.
Yeah, he seems to have pretty good aim other times.
Good strength. I don't know about aim.
Yeah, I guess so.
Maybe that's his problem. I mean, like if you play enough video games and you pick like fighting characters,
he's a strong one, but not very agile or accurate. Yeah.
So he can knife somebody into a stud. Find a stud, but he can't hit a slight target on the move.
It could be maybe the mask was slightly askew and he didn't have a good view.
I mean, it's
giving Michael Myers
15 years without a knife in his hand, and
I know.
he's expected on one night to land every stab. Even the most talented kid's going to lose it.
Well, when you're 6 years old, too, I mean,
that's just raw talent, though. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's got promise, but you can't count on that 15 years later.
No, you get a little rusty. You need to kind of just. It's kind of like
he was very rusty.
Yeah, the knife was not rusty. He was
super shiny.
Yeah, it was a good knife.
He apparently stole that from a hardware store and sells kitchen knives
and rope.
But he never used the rope. When did he use the rope?
But that's what he stole.
Maybe that's Halloween too.
That might be how he got the gravestone up the second floor, because he was able to build a harness or like a pulley kind of system to get that up through the window.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because I can't imagine Michael Myers exerting a lot of effort.
Really?
Like lifting?
I think he's just really strong.
I know, that's what I mean.
He breaks that car window.
No, I mean he's very strong. I just can't see him like that. Wouldn't be very scary looking, like kind of grunting.
Yeah,
like,
right.
You know,
like
looking like
his only words in the movie are, "It's not heavy, it's just awkward." Yeah,
exactly.
That would have taken me out of it. I'm glad he stole those.
But that would have been
ropes.
very relatable. Like, this is an everyman killer.
So I don't know. I those to me feel like small things that are
quibbles,
testaments to its time. Testaments to its budget, the hallmarks of a pioneering movie.
Mm-hmm.
But the virtues of Halloween are pretty unreal. It's not often that a single work defines a genre the way that Halloween defined at least slasher horror, if not horror in general.
Yeah, and that even at this point, I'm trying to think, I would still put it at my top of the list of that genre.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever see Friday the 13th?
No.
I thought that movie sucked. And, Nightmare on Elm Street, we talked about, we were kind of both okay on.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of like the Scream movies, but they're almost being like
owing to
meta to Halloween, and kind of making statements about Halloween. And I think Scream, the original Scream, has an amazing opening scene with Drew Barrymore.
Yeah.
And then everything after that, it's like Halloween's better.
And an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, as far as slashers go, certainly top of the list.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, even just general horror, it's in the top 10. I guess I just really admire it. I have a lot of admiration for this movie. like you said, the more I learn about the way it was made, and John Carpenter as a person who knew what he was doing, and the testament to his ability to be able to just pull this movie out.
And to be like, I'm going to make this horror movie I'm not all that passionate about, but I'm going to bring in my, as far as influence, my heroes, and bring in elements of Orson Welles and Howard Hawks and
Alfred Hitchcock.
The
Staircase, the directness of its homage to Psycho only enhanced it for me. It's not trying to hide his influences at all.
I mean, the opening shot was trying to redo his own version of Touch of Evil's opening.
Right. They're watching The Thing.
Yeah.
Like Howard Hawks, they show the director title credit card. To be able to so deftly combine influences with originality on an insanely tight budget, 40 times less than The Exorcist's budget, to do it without gore, and more effective than so many other movies in so many different ways, is just something I really admire about this movie.
No, I'm with you.
Anyway, I guess we're best buds on this.
Sure, yeah. And I think we can both recommend, well, it's not done yet, but at least the first 2 episodes of Halloween Unmasked, the podcast, if you want to dig a little bit deeper. Are you going to keep yours, you going to do the 4.5?
Yeah, I'll go 4.5.
Okay. I'll keep mine at 4, I think.
Okay.
But
that's fine.
Yeah. Good spooktacular.
Yeah. Another successful holiday spooktacular.
Another one in the books.
That's right. Mark it down. All right.
Got it.
It's been marked.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well,
guess we got to talk about what we're going to do next time.
Yeah, let's do that. So, as of this recording, this week we found out that, was it 50 million accounts were hacked or accessed by hackers on Facebook. Facebook just has been, because of the midterm elections coming up as of this recording, it's just always been in the conversation about, things like fake news and the stuff it does to our democracy. In fact, this week I was listening to a episode of Fresh Air with Terry Gross. New Yorker staff writer Evan Osnos was on there talking about, can Mark Zuckerberg fix Facebook before it breaks democracy? So with these ideas kind of floating around right now, we thought it'd be interesting to go back all the way to 2010, 8 years ago, and look at David Fincher's The Social Network.
Yeah.
Which we haven't done a Fincher yet
on
the podcast, and we're both huge fans of David Fincher's.
Sure enough, yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to look at this. The way that they was examining Facebook has become a very different way in which we examine Facebook now. It'll be interesting to see whether, you were saying off mic, whether it just seems sort of a quaint movie. Like, oh, that's what we thought was concerning about Facebook. We had no idea.
Well, it was a very different platform. Even when The Social Network came out, not nearly as many people were on it, even though at the time this was a movie about a platform that had a ton of people on it.
Yeah.
I think the tagline, if you look at the cover, the poster, says you don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies. 500 million. That sounded like a lot back in 2010. Now we're in the billions.
Yep.
Here, I just looked it up, by the way. As of the second quarter of 2018, Facebook has 2.23 billion monthly active users.
Wow.
So okay, if we were making a Facebook movie about Mark Zuckerberg now, what would the lens be? How different would it look than what we were concerned about, or at least Fincher was concerned about with Aaron? It's an Aaron Sorkin screenplay, so we can get into that as well. Yeah.
Maybe it'll like re-solidify the fact that I shouldn't have social media in my life, or else maybe I'll be like nostalgic and be like, oh yeah, I wonder if I can just use Facebook the way I used to. We'll see. We, to be honest, we kicked around a couple ideas. None of them real uplifting.
No.
And we thought maybe after Vertigo and Halloween, we needed to go in a different direction. I mean, we are heading into the...
A little less murderous, a little,
slightly less. I mean, Thanksgiving's coming after all.
Yeah. Give thanks that we're not going to watch as much murder this month.
Yeah, I'll say that as we're going around the table. What are you thankful for? Well, if you listen to our last episode of Can We Still Be Friends, you'll know that I'm about to say I'm thankful that I'm watching less murder this month. Who knows what Christmas will bring, though? I don't know. I'm not feeling bantery right now.
No, me neither. But we can go through, what we need to get through.
Okay.
Check that list off of all the different ways that people can get in contact with us.
Classics. I mean, Say what you will. This is why people tune in.
Oh, yeah.
Here we go.
This is why I tune into most podcasts, by the way. If I could just fast forward to the end of every podcast where they talk about where to listen to the podcast and how to get in contact with them.
Like Netflix's skip intro feature.
Yeah, but just...
Skip content.
Skip content.
Yeah.
Who needs it?
Get me to their Twitter.
Who needs it? Because what's great about it is if you do that, you technically do get to the end. And you can tell everyone you listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I absolutely
episode.
Heard that. Oh, yeah. Required listening.
Yeah. And then what I would do is I would not listen to any of the episodes, but because I know exactly how to get in contact with all of them, I would comment on every single
absolutely.
episode.
Why didn't you talk about this when they did? But you don't know.
And they'll come back and say, "Did you even listen to the episode?" And I'll be like, "Well, yeah, I did. I got to the end.
I did.
I went all the way to the end."
How would I know to reach you on Twitter? Anyway.
Well, all right. So there is a lot of things that you can do as a listener of our podcast, especially if you've just skipped to this section here.
Right.
So welcome to
Can We Still Be Friends? Welcome to the end of Can We Still Be Friends?
Yes, we're glad you're here. And the way you can get in contact with us is you can send us an email. Send that over to feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. You can comment on any of our episodes on our website, canwestillbefriends.net. And we are on Facebook. We should do something with our Facebook since we're going to be talking about Facebook next month.
Something like what? Like
post to it?
Like change our password?
Well, what if the Philippines movie podcast... Do they have a podcast? I never looked.
Oh, man. No wonder the confusion.
Anyways.
Can We Still Be Friends movie podcast.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the Can We Still Be Friends movie podcast. Yeah.
I haven't even thought about that.
I haven't either.
Yeah, well, we'll figure out something. I wish we had something to give away.
Crossover thing. But we're going to get in touch with Mark, see if he wants to do some sort of like reciprocal advertising thing.
Yeah, we could do that.
Extend his brand a little bit with our network.
Right.
And he could help us out a little bit.
It's a classic...
He's been asking to be on for a while.
You scratch our back, we'll scratch yours. Yeah.
I don't think we'll have him on. I mean, at this point, it just doesn't really make sense. We've told him no so many times.
Right. And it would be rude for us to be like, hey, we are going to be doing an episode about the movie that was about
really
you.
made you. Yeah.
So now's the time if you want to come on, and he's going to be like, I've been asking, and why are you... I hate that movie about myself.
I know that he would do it just because he's been wanting to be on, but it would be a real slap in the face on our part.
No. Who's the Twitter guy? Maybe we could have him on.
Jack?
Let's get Jack on.
Well, he's been emailing us. He hasn't necessarily asked to be on, but I think he probably would.
He'd do it if he knew we were talking about Mark.
Yeah.
Jack would come on and talk about Mark.
Those poker games are tense.
Look at the money that's at stake.
I know. Which is no big deal for us.
No.
With the money the podcast pulls in. But Jack sweats. Like, he gets real nervous and he gets real catty.
And Mark just kind of shrugs it off, like it's no big deal.
No, it bugs
No, I know. It's all an act.
Say what he's a classy guy. He
Mark
won't let it show. Yeah, he won't let it show.
Yeah, which is, that might be one of the biggest differences between Mark in real life and the Social Network. Yeah. He knows he's getting under Jack's skin because Jack is sweating.
Yeah.
But he doesn't gloat about it or,
Jack would. He never wins. He does not. Right. He doesn't bet his position.
Well, and so that's why I think maybe extending that olive branch and saying, Jack, we know that Mark intimidates you.
Yeah.
But here's what we could do.
And we're stuck in the middle, but...
we could do. You could come on our podcast, which we know Mark wants to be on.
I'm actually not sure how this would clear things up between them. How's that an olive branch?
Okay.
It seems like setting the olive branch on fire and smacking Mark with it.
It's giving Jack a little leg up is the better metaphor, I guess.
Okay.
But I think people would be curious to hear Jack's views on this movie about Mark.
Yeah.
Without Mark in the room.
We'll look into it. We can definitely get Mark to do some advertising for us on Facebook.
Yeah.
We'll plug his website on it's facebook.com.
We can add that to our show notes.
He'd really appreciate that.
I mean, we should do that. We always just promote our podcast's Facebook page, but
Facebook
we should
general.
just promote Facebook.
Yeah. So if you're not on Facebook, it's facebook.com. You set up an account. It's free.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
You can post pictures on it.
You can find people that in real life, like this person.
Knew them,
and you can go on Facebook.
And you don't have to, You can feel like you're a part of their life without actually being a part of their life.
I mean, I think it's a cool idea.
You can post news stories. You can post funny pictures, like your pictures, but also funny pictures that you see.
I think it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Mark obviously thinks it's a good idea.
He's got a lot tied up in it. It'd just be good for him.
Instead of just linking to our personal one, which is facebook.com/Can We Still Be Friends podcast, or can we
something like that? Yeah.
Just search it on Facebook.
It's probably the first thing that comes up on Google, whatever you Google.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that we've talked to Sergey Brin about making sure that that's what happens when you search us on Google.
Yeah.
Well, no, you search anything.
You search anything.
And for some reason, Google always tends to prefer to show us over Facebook.
Another
like those
thing
guys
that makes poker real tense.
They just don't like Mark. I don't know. It's weird
because of the movie.
I think Mark's a nice guy.
He is.
No one else seems to know. Jack and Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Bezos. None of them like him.
Real cold shoulder.
I don't know. I don't get it.
I genuinely think it's because of the movie.
The Social Network.
Yeah, the Social
ruined
Network.
It.
They just they can't help but see.
They were like, "Where's my movie?"
Okay. No, that's
now we have a movie, and that's what makes us.
Right.
We've got.
That's
it's
why
in the
we feel
Philippines,
fine.
but
yeah.
So I think that's where we kind of see where Mark's coming from. Like, hey, we get it. We know what it's like to be big.
Right.
Have a movie made after you.
I mean, not an international movie for you, Mark. I'm sorry about that, but you're right. I was actually thinking not just the jealousy, but like they just can't see Mark outside of the context of Jesse Eisenberg's Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh, yeah.
It just has colored it for them, and I think that's
who they see. Yeah.
I would not wish our difficult position on anybody. We're really caught in the middle.
And I think we could make this next podcast episode, we could try to iron out some of our differences. Their differences, not ours. We're fine.
Right. I just don't think that's not what our listeners are looking for. They just want to hear us go off half-cocked about a movie.
You're right. We're kind of turning this into something that is really it's not really our listeners' problem, and we're kind of bringing them into it, and we don't need to do that.
And I wouldn't want to give Jack or Mark another name to drop.
Right.
Oh, I was on the podcast. They do enough of that.
And we never return that and say, go to facebook.com, go to twitter.com.
So facebook.com, twitter.com. I mean, while we're at it, amazon.com.
Right.
These are good friends of ours who are doing a lot of just really innovative stuff.
The stuff that Google's doing now, just with their logos on the page.
They're cute little doodles.
Animations.
Right. Yeah.
You are not going to believe this stuff. Anyways, we got so off on a tangent with all this talk about social networks.
Yeah, this is
social
really
media.
Sorry,
websites,
the boring minutia of our friend life.
Of our circles. Yeah, but we do also have a phone number that you can call. The number to call is 847-306-9532. Operator is standing by. And by the way, happy Halloween. Before we go,
same to you,
and to our listeners.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Don't get so lackadaisical about all the pranks happening that you ignore the murderers.
If you hear someone yelling, help me, even if it's a prank, just check.
Yeah, open the door.
You don't know.
Is this a prank?
And they could be very convincing.
Yeah.
And it could be a prank.
Yeah.
So then just use your judgment.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we were able to get 5 holiday spooktaculars
under our belt. Yeah.
Under our belt. That's a lot of spook. And so
thanks for listening.
We'll catch you next time when we talk about Social Network. See ya. Operator is standing by.
Why? Why that one?